Hello, it's nice to see you again. Happy Friday. Thank you for visiting my channel. I'm always so happy to see you visiting my channel. If this is the first time you're visiting me, either you got across to me through Google search or recommendation, referral, whatever it means you came to my channel today, I am so grateful to have you here. So thank you so much for coming along. And if you're a returning subscriber, I'm giving you all the flowers. Thank you. Thank you for always trusting me and always coming back. I'm more than happy to have you here. So thank you again. To get started, if this is the first time, I would encourage you to please click that subscribe button there and the notification bell so that anytime, excuse me, anytime I release new content, you'll be the first. You'll be the first to get notification about that information. So please don't feel that. Um, and also, I would encourage you to share this on your social media platforms, be it on your LinkedIn or on your Twitter, on any media that you're using to communicate with your with your links. Please do share it so that we can spread this message across. With that said, let's dive into today's message. And what are we going to talk about today? So today we'll be talking about customer engagement with Scrum Team. Okay. One of the things that I have come to realize, or one of the things that Scrum Team or Scrum Masters have been struggling all this while, has been about how would they engage with their customers, right? How do you buy the support? How do you get the trust of stakeholders? How do you get the trust of your customers, the project sponsors, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you get involved as a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach, as a practitioner? How do you do that? It's quite so simple, right? So, as you could also agree with me that collaboration is one of the key things that Agile supports and encourages. So, and that collaboration is not just about for Scrum team, but also involving stakeholders, involving customers. So, how would you, as a Scrum Master, engage your stakeholders, engage your customers actively in the project within the sprints, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to share what I have learned over the years, and I'm also going to ask you, please do share what you have learned, and if you do agree with me, please always remember to use the comment section to put in your own ideas or maybe question something you would love me to detail more. That is also welcome. All right, so excuse me. Looking at our board today, the first thing I wanted to clarify is what does customer engagement mean, right? What does that concept mean? What does that word? What does that mean? Customer engagement. If you have to go from the dictionary definition, you would have different interpretation. But for the content of today, for the purpose of today's content, we'll be looking at how would you, as a Scrum Master, interact, or how would you engage the customer to interact with your team and organization. Excuse me, right? So how would that kind of engagement interaction work as a Scrum Master? By customer engagement, we are looking at the communication that happens between the project sponsors, the stakeholders, and the Scrum team, right? That communication that happens, sometimes team members communicate via email, sometimes team members communicate in person, sometimes team members communicate via Slack or Microsoft Teams. That kind of communication that happens, how would you, as a Scrum Master, engage your customers? Okay, so I need to clarify, by customers I'm looking at the stakeholders or the project sponsors. So sometimes the customers or the project sponsors might be internal stakeholders or it might be external stakeholders, right? So whoever that is sponsoring that project, that is what I am looking at today. Okay, now in terms of customer engagement, we're also looking at the product delivery, the transactions that happens. I don't mean financial transactions, okay? I'm looking at that services, the activities that happens to and fro, the back and forth transactions, communications that happens in between, right, between the customer and the team, right? And then also these communications could happen either in real time. By real time, I mean in a physical space, like in the office building, or it could happen in a visual space, like if you're working in a remote setting. So how would you as a scrum master, manage, coordinate, and engage actively your stakeholders so that they will become part of the sprint as the team continue to iterate. So that is what we're going to talk about today, right? So just for you to keep in mind. Now, before we can dive in, or before I need to share with you how a Scrum Master would need to engage stakeholders, I think I need to also draw our attention to what the Scrum Guide says. For me, as a Scrum Master, I consider the Scrum Guide to be the religious Bible in this sense, right? Uh, whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist, or I mean, there is this particular text we consider as a reference point. That's what I'm talking about today. Even a professor, has his or reference material. So in an agile space, we consider the Scrum Guide as the reference material. So in this case, what does the Scrum Guide say about this customer engagement? Now let's take a look at it from two perspectives. The first is from the team's perspective. How does the team, by the team I mean the Scrum team, right? How does the Scrum team, engage the customer? The Scrum Guide says, quotes, the Scrum team is responsible for all product-related activities from stakeholder collaboration, verification, maintenance, operation, experimentation, research and development, and anything else that might be required, end quotes. What does that say? It kind of gives us that compendium idea of how the team is also involved. Okay, I mean, there has been some kind of debate about who should engage the customer. To what extent should the developers, Scrum Master, and even the people engage these customers? To what extent? But I'm not talking about who and who should not. What we are talking about today is how would you, as a Scrum Master, engage these stakeholders or engage your customer? Okay, so this is to give us a sense that it does not really lie on the Scrum Master to engage with the customer. That is number one, right? The second thing is to what extent that the customer should engage the customer. To what extent the Scrum Master, okay? So I'm not talking about who should or who should not. That debate is left for another time. But for today, let's just pay attention to the topic of today. And then on the role of the Scrum Master, what does the Scrum Guide say? It says, quote, facilitating stakeholder collaboration as requested or needed. Okay, remember that one of the primary responsibilities of the Scrum Master is to help the team to deliver value by using the Scrum process. So the Scrum Master is mostly concerned about the Scrum process. The product owner who is acting in the person of the customer is always making sure that the Scrum team is building what the customer has in mind. Okay, so the Scrum Master is there to facilitate. And then this idea of facilitation, I have tried to also emphasize and explain this. Facilitation is to make things easy. So the Scrum Master is making it easy. That collaboration that happens between the team, between the stakeholders and the organization, right? So if that is so, now the question becomes, how does the Scrum Master facilitate? How does the Scrum Master engage the customer? How does the Scrum Master work closely with the team? By the team, I mean the developers and the people, to make sure that all hands are on deck. Now, here comes the real information. I think the first thing that the Scrum Master should do in order to engage the customer is to identify what is called the minimum viable product, MVP, right? I mean, you wouldn't work with your team members to build on something that the customer doesn't like or doesn't recommend, right? You need to always iterate. You need to always, in each of your sprints, your team should be mindful of building what the customer recommends, and who keeps the team in check concerning what the customer recommends. That is the product owner. And you could agree with me that unavailability of the product owner among the Scrum team is very, very catastrophic. I mean, I have worked with team members where the product owner, was always in here and there. So it's kind of very dicey to have a Scrum team. In fact, it is very, very dangerous to have a Scrum team without a product owner. Some organizations are always recommending that the Scrum Master will work as the Scrum Master and the PO, which is not the recommendation from according to the Scrum Guide, right? If we have to take it, if we have to practice pure Scrum, there should be a Scrum Master, there should be a PO, there should be the developers. So to identify the MVP, the PO should be available with the team in mostly all of the Scrum events. The PO should be available during the sprint planning. The PO should be available daily stand-up. The PO should be available during the sprint review. The PO could be available during the sprint retrospective, right? So I'm not going to go into which of the ceremonies the PO should attend. That is not the main purpose of today's conversation. But what I'm going to emphasize is if you're a Scrum Master, please always try to highlight and emphasize and work closely with your PO to make sure that the PO is always available. In other words, so that if these developers, if these guys do have questions, need more clarification, the PO should be there to highlight and answer and respond to that, so that these guys will be building based on the MVP. Now, the third thing I need to emphasize here is how also you could engage your stakeholders is during the sprint review. For some team, they wouldn't kind of recommend or agree to have the customer or even the stakeholders attend their sprint review meeting, which in my own opinion is anti-Scrum, right? I've also emphasized in this here that some team do practice what is called Scrum bots. What does that mean? Borrowing some practice of Agile and leaving others behind. Scrum recommends that at the end of every sprint, the development team should be able to demo, show what they have built for that 2-week sprint or 3-week sprint or even 1-week sprint or 4-week sprint, based depending. So during the sprint review, it is an opportunity for the Scrum Master to engage the stakeholders, engage the customers, capture feedback. In fact, for me, one of the key unique thing about Scrum is this idea of feedback. Feedback loop is so important. I mean, I would not exhaust the importance of feedback during the sprint review or even during the whole Scrum process, right? There are different techniques you could use to capture feedback, which is outside of the scope of today's content, right? So it is left for the Scrum Master to figure out what works well for the team. Some team members send out survey forms. Some team members used to do a pool section during the sprint review. I mean, this is outside. I'm just giving you an idea of how you as a Scrum Master could capture feedback. So using the sprint review could be one of those moments where you as a Scrum Master should engage your stakeholders or your customers. The other thing is to establish a communication channel. For me, emailing back and forth might not be the ideal because sometimes you might miss the emails, right? So it might be very, very difficult to use email as a way to communicate with the customer. There are certain information you might use the email, but for me, I mean, creating a communication channel and getting your stakeholders or your customers involved for that channel. Slack gives us that functionality. Microsoft Teams gives us that functionality so that, you can keep a thread of what goes within the channel, right? This is dependent on the organization and the team structure. So you as a Scrum Master, I'm giving you an idea on what you could do in other ways you can also create this communication channel, right? And the other thing is giving it access to people, giving access to the information radiator, right? I have worked in a situation where the customer has requested to see what we are building, right? By following the progress of the sprints on the board. Every organization has different tools and softwares they use in monitoring the progress of the sprints. Some teams use the Jira board, some teams use Azure DevOps board, some teams use Trello, depending on what works for every organization. So whichever one works for you. But as the Scrum Master, giving access to whoever requests for that, especially from the stakeholders or the customer, could be one way to engage them. Let them, follow along. If we need to poke them, if we need to, ask questions in there, that draws their attention. But you should keep in mind there are different roles you assign to people when you are giving them access to your board. For example, the Jira board has administrative role, has user role, has view role. So if you're giving access to your customers, I wouldn't think you give them that administrative role. I think the ideal thing might be to give them the view role so that they can just view without without editing anything or without disrupting the board. Now, the other final, but not the least, I wanted to share is to connect. Connecting with your PO is very essential. Try as much as you can to have either weekly or bi-weekly connection with your PO. During that time, you are just interacting based on what the team has been building, based on the products, based on the process, on the Scrum process. Remember, the PO is acting on behalf of the customer. So the PO has direct access, or what I call first-hand information on the products. If the PO is representing the customer, so as a Scrum Master, I think it's very, very pertinent that you connect with your PO in such a way you can really understand how much the team is in sync or in alignment with what the customer has already recommended or what the customer is recommending. And then connecting with the PO could take, in different forms. And if you are working with distributed teams, you can have that on your calendar. You schedule that, and you can keep it on a recurring basis. If it is a weekly connection, you can have that on your calendar so that it's kind of there. You put it in there. Sometimes people forget things. If it is a bi-weekly connection, put it on your calendar. Either you set up the meeting or the PO sets up that meeting. Let you guys agree on the time and day that works for you. If it is in a physical space, you are working on site, find out a time, either going for coffee, coffee break or whatever, chatting. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be all seriousness. There are different ways, techniques and tactics you could use as a Scrum Master to engage your customer. All right, that's about 19 minutes. So I want to hear your own thoughts. Right? I want to know how you have engaged your customer. I want to know how you have been able to proactively engage your customer. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop for today. Please, if you haven't done so, I would recommend you click that subscribe button there and get on the notification bar so that you can get notification anytime I release new content. And please do share this on your social media platforms and let's build this community of practice. I am always here to bring the best, especially when it comes to Scrum and Agile. Okay. Thank you so very much for coming along today. It is my pleasure to connect with you today, and I'm hoping to meet with you again next time. In the meantime, I hope you stay well. Bye for now.